Hello, welcome to Creative Futures here at Wrexham Glendower University. I'm Graham Park, and joining me today is Dr. Simon Morrison, who, apart from being a very old friend, is a writer, an academic. He's got a 30-year career that involves being a writer for magazines such as DJ Magazine, Mix Mag. He lived in Ibiza to set up Ministry Magazine. He's also written for The Guardian. He's written several books, and with several more books on the way. He's run his own PR company. He's worked on TV and radio. And he's also currently senior lecturer in music journalism at Chester University. Please welcome Dr. Simon Morrison. So, Simon, welcome to Wrexham Glendower University.
Thank you very much. Lovely. First time in Wrexham.
Really?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, let's hope it's the first of many.
Yeah.
Now, I've known you for a very long time, and you've had quite a varied career. The purpose of our Creative Futures sessions is to give inspiration, advice and help and encouragement to our creative students. We have journalists, people who want to work in radio, television, and all kinds of stuff. Are you doing now what you wanted to do when you were younger?
Well, my career's been through several different extensions. It struck me recently that I've made money from music my whole career, from writing about music, from working in PR about music, to teaching about music. I've never made any music. But it was always my intention to do something with music, and the route that I thought I would get to it would be principally writing. I always wanted to be a writer. There's nothing else I ever wanted to do.
When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I was writing stories from 3-4 years old.
Really?
And stapling them together.
So you're doing exactly what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a photograph that I show my students. I always point out, because I'm at a typewriter, and I always say, "What's that?"
Yeah,
Somebody once said, "Fax machine?" But no, it's a typewriter.
Yeah, I used to have a typewriter.
Yeah, it was my favourite ever Christmas present when I was 10. And I'm there, and I've got a pen behind my ear, and I'm like writing. I'm like dreaming of going around the world writing stories.
When you were 10?
When I was 10, but I was doing stories before that. I was swapping them in the playground for jars of marbles. Really? So I was publishing in the...
So your favourite subjects at school were English then?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a very good half a brain. So anything to do with English and writing, I was smashing all the competitions, winning all the prizes. And, you know, that was my route through to A-levels and university. I can't add up. You know, I'm innumerate.
So... You're obviously from the south of England, southeast of
London town.
London town, right?
Yeah.
But so how did you choose? You went to university, yeah? Where and what to do?
Well, I mean, I did very well at school. I had interviews at Oxford and Cambridge. They didn't want me, so...
Really?
Yeah. So I was looking around, and because I grew up in London, I thought, I want to be in a city, but I don't want to be in London. I want to use this opportunity to get away. And, of course, I was from the south, but the cities are in the north: Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle. So I put all those down. And Manchester came back and said, yeah, no interview. If you want to come, you're in. And
when was this?
This was 1989.
A great year for being in Manchester.
So I decided, I'd never been there before. I think I've been there once for a visit. I moved up completely not knowing where it was. I've been away in Australia for a gap year. And I remember arriving, and it was like landing on a different planet. And I'm sure the students have heard all this before, but people had T-shirts that said Stone Roses. And I remember I said to somebody, "What are Stone Roses?"
Wow.
And they said, "It's a band, you pillock." And I had no idea.
So presumably you went to this club that I apologise for bringing it up again, called the Hacienda.
Well, I do remember, so I can say that I went
Well,
to
you can't
Hacienda.
really, if you went, you can't really remember though.
Yeah,
Surely.
I can say that I went in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was the very tail end of the 80s. Obviously, these guys had the student experience, and I was in shared accommodation, and the cool guy in the accommodation went, "There's this club called the Hacienda, and you order own it or something. We should go and check it out." So I went at some stage in the end times of the 1980s, and I went in, and I don't think I ever went home.
Yeah,
That's
well,
how I feel.
it was a great place. If you went there...
I can't remember the music or the DJs, I just remember
Oh, come on.
a really good atmosphere.
Well, considering, as I mentioned at the beginning, you wrote for DJ Magazine, Mix Mag, and Ministry of Sound asked you to set up their own Ministry magazine, which meant living in Ibiza. Do you think going to Hacienda influenced or helped you?
Opened the doors, shall we say, to other possibilities. Yes, I mean, going to clubs in North London and Tottenham and places like that when I was growing up involved wearing a tie and the
Even not just in North London, that's,
No,
what, that's true everywhere, really.
carpets, you know, the kind of handrails that give you electric shock, you know, can set your hair off. And I went to the Hacienda, and it was nothing like that. It was a huge, cavernous warehouse with this strange music playing, and I realised.
Well, it was strange music, though. It was strange music, yeah.
Yeah.
Music that's now part of modern musical culture.
Yeah.
But it was very strange. Acid
Yeah.
house and Detroit techno.
I mean, I'd grown up as a kind of rock, metal,
Yeah.
indie, pop, you know, being in the audience at Top of the Pops and things like that. And
You were in the audience.
oh yeah. I
Brilliant.
went back to do a story about it as well, and behind the scenes when I became.
You know they repeat Top of the Pops from the 80s on BBC Four. So we have to look out for you now, yeah?
Well, Yaz, The Only Way Is Up. I got asked by the producer to dance behind Yaz.
Really?
When she sang The Only Way Is Up, yeah.
Wow. If I played out the Hacienda, would you have recreated that moment?
I recreated the movie, yeah.
No, seriously, look out for Simon on Top of the Pops. But what did the Hacienda feel like? If you say you're used to clubs with carpets and wearing ties, what did it feel like, especially to a southerner?
Well, just very, very different. The whole thing just felt completely different, and it was the 80s. And you know, having said that, I didn't know what Stone Roses were by the end of my first term at university. Not that I've got much hair now, but I had floppy hair and baggy jeans, and
I do remember.
I was walking around like Ian Gallagher, and got back to London, and everyone was like, "What's happened to you?" And I got Manchesterised. But you know, I really, at that point, I still wasn't necessarily into the kind of Saturday night music until I kind of got totally swept away in a kind of rush of the whole experience of nightclubs and that kind of culture, and I really did have an epiphany, and I just thought, this is what I want to be doing, not only at the weekend. I think for some people you can contain it. I thought, I want this to be my life. I want to do something to do with clubs.
If you got there at 89 and started doing a degree, how long was it until you thought, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to make my life?
Well, I mean, in terms of how I started in writing, at first I got to university, there was a student newspaper, and I think you have to have that kind of impetus inside you.
So what degree were you doing?
English and American literature.
Okay.
Because I wanted to write, but I didn't quite know what that meant or what I would be doing. So I saw a student newspaper, and you have to have that kind of impetus, and I just thought, right, how do I get to write for that? Who do I need to talk to? And this is first year, quite early on. And so that was my first break in writing. And so I was writing about kind of venues or clubs. There's a place in Manchester called Band on the Wall.
Yeah.
You know, Band on the Wall? So they sent me down there to do a story, and it was a big feature over 2 pages, what I would now know to be a double-page spread, for the student newspaper. And I wrote it. Well, it was kind of a strange kind of story. And so I went back a couple of weeks later to go to Band on the Wall, and they'd blown it up and framed it and put it on the wall.
Wow.
Band on the Wall.
Yeah.
And I was with my friends in the first year going, I wrote that story. And so all these kind of... Even at that
is it
stage,
still there?
It's not there anymore.
Oh,
no.
never mind.
But even at that stage, I wanted to kind of write. And so, you know, I was doing whatever I could to write for the student newspaper and anything I could do around that time, so I had something of a portfolio.
Just on a quick side, as a teenager, did you read NME, Sounds, Melody Maker, and all that?
Yeah, I was into the music press. Yeah, NME, I suppose, would be the one that I would pick up, and all sorts of different music magazines. But I went through all sorts of phases. I remember getting out of heavy metal and into electro one afternoon. Yeah. Because someone had a cassette in about '83.
When you say electro, you mean like Africa Bambaataa,
yeah, and all that kind of furious fire.
It was incredible.
Yeah, but I think at that age you're kind of like you're like a sponge, absorbing any kind of new musical influences. So that was the same when I got to Manchester, and this was new. It was brand new for me. Well, kind of for the country, I think, at that point. And I definitely got pulled along in that kind of current. Right.
So you write an article that ends up on the wall of Band on the Wall. So presumably you carry on writing for the student newspaper.
Yeah.
How long?
Yeah, and then there's a little bit of a gap because I graduated. I don't know what stage the students are here, but I graduated in the middle of a recession.
Yeah,
1992.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that because I wasn't very cogent of the news. But you look back and you think, oh, that's why I couldn't get a job. I didn't even connect the fact there was a recession.
So you graduated, but you stayed in Manchester?
No.
No. Okay.
I left the country. On a kind of, I don't know what I was doing, to be honest, but I kind of went on a bit of a...
Too many nights at Hacienda, probably.
Yeah. A Jack Kerouac-inspired, on-the-road adventure that took me to... I lived in Sydney for a year, I lived in LA for a year. I mean, fantastic experiences. And obviously, I was already a clubber by that point, so I was going to all the raves in Sydney.
So you're just raving around the world?
Raving around the world.
Were you writing?
Not really. I
But
didn't have the attention span.
were you taking it all in? And presumably at some point you must have referred back to those times?
It was certainly developmental in terms of experience and growing up. I mean, the experience I had, I was in a big earthquake in LA in '94.
Really?
So, yeah, and I got very connected to the club culture scene in LA, which was completely run by Brits. I don't know if you were playing over there at that
I
point.
did a lot, yeah.
So I was still kind of a punter at that point. But when I got back, and I got back to the UK, and I thought, I'm not going back to London. I tried it I had a girlfriend by that point with me from Australia. Went back to London for about a week, thought this isn't working. And my girlfriend...
A week?
Said, yeah. She said, you're always talking about Manchester and how good Manchester was. Why don't we move back there? And I moved back there at the beginning of '95, and that's the beginning of me meeting you,
Yeah.
and my career really taking off.
So what was your first paid job? Your first when you thought if you go back to Manchester '95, at what point did you go, yes, I'm a writer?
Again, I had to start back at the beginning. I was 2 years behind everyone else because I had this 2-year gap year, so I was writing for free for the Big Issue.
Oh yeah.
And it seemed to me at that point they were like, does anybody want to review clubs? I'm like, oh, I'll review the clubs. So I went to various places around Manchester at that point until I had enough in a portfolio to go to London and start knocking on doors. And that's not something that came naturally to me, but I knew I had to do it. Go around all the magazines. Can I just have a word? Look, this is what I've been doing in Manchester. These are the people I know.
So basically what you're saying is you know what you want to do. You've got what you believe to be a strong portfolio.
Yeah.
So you just have to get off your backside, be proactive,
Yeah.
and knock on doors.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to knock on my door and say, do you want to be an international music journalist?
Oh.
So I had to, and I'm not that pushy instinctively, but I knew that I had to do that. So
Yeah, but if you're passionate about what you're doing, that'll make you be maybe a little bit more pushy than you would normally be.
because I want to do this more than I want to do anything.
Yeah, so
And I don't want to get a job, and I've been a temp, and I've done admin, and I've been a secretary, and I don't want to do that. I want to write about music. And the magazine that hired me was DJ.
That DJ magazine. If you're familiar with DJ magazine, DJ Mag, it's been around since.
Oh, it started as Jocks. It started
That's
out
right, Jocks, yeah.
as an industry magazine for mobile disc jockeys that would go and play weddings. But
That's right, yeah.
Carl Cox, those guys were playing weddings.
Exactly.
So it'd be for those, Dougie Doubledecks kind of neon lights kind of DJs. But then when the club culture thing picked up, they got picked up with it. They rebranded as DJ magazine for DJs, and it's still going. It's massive.
And it still exists, doesn't it?
It's all over the world as well.
Yeah.
It's almost as big as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And Mixed Mag also survives.
Yeah. So that's your first gig, DJ Mag. What are you staff or are you freelance? Or what?
The thing that I was able to use was my location. And this is what I say to my students or people here. I use the fact that I was in the north as an advantage, because I was able to say to magazines that are in London, I could be your Manchester correspondent. I could write, and they all knew that stuff was going on at the Hacienda and different clubs and Sankey's at that point, and Home.
Cream in Liverpool.
And Cream. So
Gate Crash.
yeah. So my USP.
Up your Ronson. Sorry.
Should say that's a club brand rather than.
Yeah.
So my USP.
Back to basics. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Was to write about those clubs for the London media. It's very hard to get journalists out of the M25.
Yeah, well, no. Do you think that's still the case? Because I remember when I met Mike Pickering, who I used to DJ with Hacienda, we were just so annoyed about how London-centric the media was. The Face, ID, even like DJ Mag, Mix Mag, there wasn't a world outside the M25.
Yeah.
And we had to really, really push to say, look, don't ignore what's happening up here. I know that was it. Is that still the case with social media or not?
I mean, it's even more the case that everything's so kind of transnational that there's all these kind of little micro communities connecting via social media. No one's really moving around anymore like they used to.
No, you're right. That's a good point. People used to travel the length and breadth of the country to go to a good club night.
Well, I remember going to Back to Basics in Leeds and Gate Crash in Sheffield, and then back for an after hours in Manchester.
On the same night?
On the same night, three cities, and people would just move around like that. And
it was great days. Boys and girls.
It was fantastic, but also I was...
But you were writing about this when you're doing it?
My dreams were coming true because I was writing... No, seriously, I was writing about these experiences, And then...
And getting paid for it?
Yeah, and you pick up a magazine and you'd go, I wrote that. Look, there's my name, my byline. And then a cheque would drop through the door and you get paid for it as well. And for me, it was all that I ever wanted. I mean, and then what happened was I got to know the people at DJ. They were a really nice bunch of people. Chris was the editor at that point. And they got me to do their listings, which is the most boring job I've ever done. But then a thing came along called the internet. Yeah. And they said, look, we're not going to have listings because people can find out stuff like that anyway. But we've got your 2 pages. Could you fill them doing something? And that's when I became a columnist for the magazine. And that's when things took a step up.
Is this your DJ Wrong?
DJ Wrong,
pseudonym?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the columns was called Dispatches from the Wrong Side.
That's it.
And I was very interested in wrong behaviour, immoral behaviour, which would happen a lot in nightclubs, but also just investigating that and reporting on that, not necessarily doing it.
No, of course.
But just being around that kind of thing. So it was their kind of 2 pages for kind of wonky stories from Clubland. So, you know, I gate crashed Kylie Minogue's birthday party and I got deported from Russia and I hung out with Howard Donald from Take That and... Just kind of, I went raving with Judith Chalmers from Wish You Were Here in Ibiza.
I remember that one, yes.
Just weird stories that I tell people now and like, yeah, that never happened.
Senior lecturer.
But
Senior
I can say,
now.
read the book.
Yeah. Yes, the columns turned into, put them in a book, didn't they?
So it's Dispatches from the Wrong Side. I wrote for 8 years. And at one point it was every 2 weeks. So I was writing stories. And there's stories from here, from like all over the world, Singapore, Judith Chalmers, Paris, Staley Bridge.
Staley Bridge in Lancashire.
Yeah, Singapore.
It was a real hotspot for all kinds of wrongdoing.
Staley Vegas.
Yeah, Staley Vegas, yeah.
So
let's just show everyone that it's called Discombobulated. It's Dispatches from the Wrong Side, and it is really good. There's a young Simon there with a box of cereal.
Yeah. That box of cereal was over 18 and consented entirely to that. Yeah. No, that's the Chelsea Hotel in New York where I stayed for a bit.
I mean, that's a historic venue.
Well, it's where Sid
Vicious died.
Well, it's Nancy Spungen, yeah.
Sorry, Nancy Spungen.
And John Lennon lived there, and Dylan Thomas died there, and Joni Mitchell wrote Chelsea Morning about the Chelsea Hotel, and that's why the Clintons called their daughter Chelsea. I mean, the history of that place on its own is amazing. I wrote a story from there. There are photos in the middle.
Yeah, photos in the middle.
That's the gangster Dave Courtney holding a gun to my head.
That is the gangster Dave Courtney. There's you, the Golden Gate Bridge. This is fantastic. Look, there's you in a pool with some scantily clad women.
Fufu Lamar.
Yeah, look at that. It's a great book. This is turning into a bit of a... Bit of a plug, that's the word I look for. But honestly, it's a very good book. And some rubbish ones as well, yeah. So you got your dream job, you're getting paid for it. So how long did the DJ magazine last?
Well, that ran for 8 years.
8 years. And so that takes you into the early part of this century.
Yeah, and it's called Discombobulated because I love the English language. I've always been a writer, and I went to university to study English, and so you combobulate, which means it's a scientific term, which means you pull together. Yeah. Or you discombobulate, which means you fall apart and break apart, which seemed to be the story of the weekend for me. Mm-hmm. And it starts with the word disco. So I'm like...
I love it. I never knew that. I never knew that.
Discombobulated, yeah. So that ended, and then I started another column, and imagine getting this phone call. The editor phoned me and said, Simon, would you write a column for us called Around the World in 80 Clubs? So I said, what does that mean?
Which editor of which magazine?
This was Leslie at DJ Magazine at this point.
All right, still DJ Magazine.
So I was like, what does that mean? And they went, well, you go to 80 different places around the world and have a party and write about it.
Now, this was when? About 12 years ago?
Yeah, so, yeah.
Magazines sold more copies then, didn't they?
Yeah.
Do you think that could happen now? Because obviously there must be a cost in that. You were obviously paid. Yeah. And flights and accommodation and everything, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly, in terms of industry and creative industries, when I started writing for DJ, it was 10p a word. So if you wrote 1,000 words, you got 100 quid. And that was like, right, I'm going to have to write a bunch of stories to pay rent this month. Yeah. And then when I started, I did a piece for them about 20 years later, 10p a word. So, I mean, what other industry has there been no improvement? But as a columnist, and I don't mind sharing, it was £250 a column, and that was 1,500 words. So it's better money, regular money, twice a month, so that's £500. That's my rent paid, my bills paid, plus expenses, plus being flown around the world to go to all different following people like you around.
And yeah. And I remember, oh no, it's Simon again. What's he doing here? But then you'd write about us all, which is good. Pre-social media, someone like you is a real bonus because we're going to be in DJ Magazine because Simon's here.
And it's 2 pages, so you know it's going to be serious coverage.
Exactly. But when you were doing the Around the World in 18 Nights, was that a freelance job?
No, that was the
So you're being paid? On the books, basically?
Yeah. I think we did one with you in the Alps, I remember one of those.
Yeah, we did. It was...
a Galaxy thing.
A Galaxy, Val d'Isère.
Yeah.
We did, my Galaxy radio show was live from Val d'Isère.
Yeah.
And we had a club night as well.
Yeah.
And loads of listeners flew out. And then you interviewed me on top of a mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we both got very sunburned because we didn't have hats on. Sun cream.
And then you drink a load, then you think, actually, I can't snowboard. How do I get down this?
I know. I do remember. Yeah.
But I mean, that was a wonderful experience, and that took me to Moscow, and they let me in that time.
Sorry, just want to say, can you believe we got paid to do that?
I know, it's
Sorry.
insane.
Yeah, carry on.
Moscow, Marrakesh, Beijing, Brazil. I followed this Israeli thrash metal band around Brazil. North Africa, New York.
And were you doing all the research yourself? Going, I know where I'm going to go next, or was anyone else involved?
Yeah, there's a bit of that, and the PR companies would get involved.
Oh, yeah.
So, there is a thing, can you come and write about it? Xbox was big for that.
Yeah.
So they'd take people to the Alps, they'd take people to Ibiza, put on swanky parties, get everyone smashed, and then hope some good press would come out of it. It was a bit sort of random, but sometimes it'd be like there's the guys at Warung, which is the most amazing club I've been to, which is on the beach in Brazil, would contact DJ Mag, will someone come out? So they'd send me out. And so it was a fantastic time. But then, I think the internet has smashed a lot of it, but also this kind of term that came in, convergence. So, they'd say, take you and a photographer, that's 2 flights, 2 hotel rooms, 2 fees, 2 lots of expenses. Couldn't you take the photographs? And that started happening. And I said, well, no, I'm not a photographer, I'm a writer. I don't want to take photographs. I don't want to be responsible for a camera. I want to be enjoying myself. And that happened as well. And also the other thing I noticed started happening was the word counts were going down.
Do you think that corresponds with the rise of the internet? Because physical sales of magazines are going down, so budgets get shrink.
Budgets were getting... I mean, not only the impact of the internet on the media, but the impact of the internet on the music industry.
Yeah, well, exactly.
People weren't buying music, the labels had less money. There's just less money slooshing about. And I don't want to pretend that it was a golden age, because that's
well, I was about to say, do you think you caught the tail end of a golden era?
No, music is for you when you're young, in the era that you're young. And I'm not anymore, so I don't, and I teach. So I don't want to tell my students things weren't as good as they used to be, because that's not a good message.
I totally agree with that.
And they're having a time in their lives, so who am I to say? Yeah. But I do think things have changed. But in a way, there's a great article came out in The Guardian recently that this is the best time to be a music journalist there's ever been.
Why?
Well, in the 70s, you could write for the NME, Sounds, or Medley Maker, and that was it.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't get a gig on one of those, so now there are loads of print magazines. There's more coming out as well. You can
even create your own blog.
You can create your own, start your own thing up. And, Pitchfork, the guy who started Pitchfork's turning over $5 million a year.
Wow.
And he used to work in a record store. So, I mean, I think the whole thing's blown open, and that could be seen as a positive. But certainly, I didn't make it to 80 clubs.
You didn't?
I did 44 and got fired.
Why didn't you make it to 80?
I got fired.
You got fired? Why?
I don't really know why, to be honest. And, well, a new guy took over the magazine. He was actually a friend of mine, bizarrely, and they just wanted to change it all. So, that was the end of that. But
do you ever think maybe we should finish it in 20 years when we're really old and grey?
Well, I mean, it was just
greyer, older and greyer.
It was an amazing ride. And it took me, and I was a traveller anyway. Like I said, I had that gap 2 years when I was
How important,
around.
just go back to, just very briefly, that gap year, how important was that gap year to what you ended up doing?
Oh, it was seminal to me. It was the most amazing
Where did you go again?
Mainly Sydney and LA. And, it was just a great experience. I mean, I lived with Rex Harrison's grandson, Will Harrison, in LA. It's just kind of
Rex Harrison, proper old school English actor.
Yes, whose son, Noel Harrison, sang Windmills of Your Mind, if you remember that. Yeah. Because he came round to...
How did you fund that? Because this is like in the 80s. Have you got any brothers or sisters?
I've got a brother, yeah.
Got a brother. But what did your parents think in the 80s? Oh, I'm off. Don't know where I'm going.
Well, the mad thing was, this is before the internet. I mean, I basically fell off a cliff. I'd phone once every 3 months or something.
Probably
now,
massive cost as well to phone home.
yeah. So I didn't do it that much. And now people go travelling and they're at the airport on Facebook saying, I'm having a cup of tea. And you just don't lose touch with people, do you?
No.
But then, I mean, when the earthquake happened in LA and all the communications went down. So, and it was in the afternoon in the UK. So my parents, it was a news flash. There'd been a big earthquake in LA. They couldn't call me. No mobile phones. And so, yeah. And the weird thing about that, I lived in Venice Beach. And we all walked down.
Working out.
Yeah. We all walked down to the beach. Because we thought, well, and I'm English, I don't know what to do in an earthquake.
No.
But everyone sort of came out of the buildings down to the beach, because no buildings could fall on you on the beach. That's what I was thinking, but I'd never heard of tsunamis at that point. So,
right.
So it was, it was weird.
It's funny, because if that was happened now, you'd probably be contacted by someone you know in the media.
Yeah.
And you'd be doing a FaceTime live report, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Wow.
They just couldn't get hold of me. I mean, the whole communications thing collapsed. The freeways were collapsing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first line of my book is... I don't know, a few years ago I spent an eventful period living on the wrong side in LA. I've since managed to pull myself back because as nice a place as the wrong side is, I wouldn't necessarily want to live there again. But I do like to visit occasionally, and these dispatches form a record of such excursions.
That's
So
good.
in a way
That's
it was
good.
an attempt, because LA, La La Land, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
the stuff that went on there, you know, is unprintable.
I know. I've been there. Now, let's go back forward again. You didn't do your 80 nights, you did 44 nights.
Yeah.
After that, you lived in Ibiza.
Yes.
And that was to set up Ministry of Sound's magazine called Ministry. Tell us about that. How
Yeah,
did that
so
happen?
I don't know if the audience is aware, but there's a nightclub in London called Ministry of Sound,
Yeah.
which I presume you've played, have you?
I was the Friday night resident when it opened.
Oh,
yes,
there you
yes.
go, yeah.
I don't think I've dropped that one in before, but there you go now.
And it was a great club.
It was an amazing club.
So-
Not as good as Hacienda, but it was an amazing club, yeah.
Started by James Palumbo,
Yeah.
The son of Lord Palumbo, interesting character. So he's a businessman, he's not a raver or anything, but he knew he could make money out of the scene, and he was looking to do extensions, brand extensions they'd call them. So Ministry of Sound CDs, people probably know. And they started a magazine called Ministry, because at that point magazines were selling a lot, 100,000 a month. And the headquarters of the club scene is Ibiza. So at some stage they thought, let's do a magazine in Ibiza called Ministry in Ibiza, which was, must have taken them ages to come up with that name. And they knew me through various channels, so I got called down for an interview, which happened at Euston train station. So I came down from Manchester, met them all at Euston train station in a pub up on the first level.
Yeah.
And never got out of the station, got on the train back to Manchester, and on the way back the phone went, they said, you got it.
Wow.
So it's you've been living in Ibiza for 4 months in a villa with a car, expenses, make sure you spend your expenses, go out, enjoy yourself, just put the magazine out every 2 weeks. And I did that for 2 years, so that, I remember seeing you there at one point.
Absolutely. I too spent 4 months in
And you were in the
Ibiza.
magazine, or we got you doing something, didn't we?
Yeah, if memory serves me correct, we did something.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Don't know what. But I mean, that was a great, to be the editor of a magazine, you're kind of the figurehead.
So if we look, on one side, look at a CV, which is something I'm always telling our students about, you're building a fantastic CV along the way.
And, you know, without jumping through to now, I mean, what I love is there's been a thread that makes sense to me from being a wannabe journalist to a writer and academic. It's all kind of built from what's gone on before, and it's all to do with music, so...
So you got 4 months in Ibiza,
Yeah.
editor of Ministry magazine. What happened after that?
I mean, well, it's great. I mean, that was a great experience. I was able to be very creative, putting ideas...
You said that it had an expenses account.
Yeah.
Was that enough to cover the ridiculous price of everything in clubs?
Well, I mean, that was 1999 and 2000, the summers I were there. And I must have been the only person, I suppose they call them the workers, don't they, or the Brits that go over to work. In a way, I was a worker, but I came back with enough money to buy a flat.
Wow.
So, I mean, that most people come back with their heads in bits.
Yeah, of course.
Owing people money and very sunburnt.
Or never come back.
Or never come
disappear.
Yeah. So I tell people it was the hardest work I ever did, and they burst out laughing. Like that.
But you're an editor of a magazine. You had deadlines to meet. You had
Yeah.
content to,
Every 2 weeks,
every
mate.
2 weeks,
And so-
while living on an island.
Yeah.
That's a 24-hour party.
So the London office would call up and say, oh, there's this big cream's having a big party in Amnesia, make sure you're down there, so show your face. There was all that kind of stuff. So I would go, and I like parties, and I like enjoying myself. So then the phone would go at 10 in the morning, and they'd go, why aren't you in the office? I'm like, because I got in 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
You know, I can't do all of it.
Yeah.
I remember going to a night at Pasha, which is a great nightclub in Ibiza. I left at 9 in the morning, and walked round to the office and opened it up and started working. Because I thought, well, I might as well just go to work.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that makes it hard is the bit that's missing in that is sleep. I was constantly...
But it was only
tired.
4 months, though.
It was only 4 months, and I came home and went to bed for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, a phenomenal experience, and I was interviewed by The Big Breakfast, and I was a TV presenter out there, so they got me presenting television.
Yes, I'd forgotten
I
that.
had my own radio show, so I had a radio show on the Ibiza radio station Cadena CN, but I was also presenting for Galaxy Radio. I was presenting for Rapture TV. I had a gossip column, so all of a sudden I'm a TV presenter as well. And stuff that's still on the on YouTube, which is quite frightening.
Yeah,
So
look him up. Look him up. How will they find it?
it was Rapture TV.
Rapture
probably,
TV,
yeah.
Simon Morrison. You've got to have a look for that.
But I got to interview, you know, Sean Ryder and lots of the kind of people who were coming out to play, all the DJs, Frankie Knuckles, and you know, and so it was a great experience and another important milestone for me.
So, did Ministry Magazine continue, or was it just for that?
Well,
summer?
yeah, I mean, an interesting lesson here. I was always freelance, never employed. In fact, the job
For Ministry, yeah.
ever.
Oh, ever. Okay.
So I set up my own PR company. Everything's been done by myself. But while I was in Ibiza, the editor of the UK magazine said, "Will you be our deputy editor when you get back? We love what you've done. Come work for us." So that been giving everything up, moving to London, getting a job, and I thought I don't want to give up my freelance freedom because it is. I work for myself. I do what I need to do, and so I turned it down, which I thought was quite brave.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it difficult to turn down, or did you follow your heart?
I followed my heart, and then Palumbo shut the magazine down. And when he shut it down, they all turned up for work. There's about 20 of them. The bouncers were there.
Yeah.
They said, "You haven't got time to clear your desk. The magazine's shut, and you're all fired, and we're getting you out of the building now."
Wow.
The club bouncers did that.
So by following your heart, you luckily
Yeah.
made the right decision.
Because I think, you know, freelance, being entrepreneurial, which is an option I talk to my students about as well, it does give you a certain amount of power in terms of people can't shut you down.
No, exactly.
They can take away one thing, maybe,
No,
but then you've got 4 other things going at the same
I
time.
totally agree. I mean, I've been freelance, self-employed all my life, apart from my alter ego as a senior lecturer here.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. You make your own decisions, and you live or die by your decisions.
One of my lecturers said that to me when I was at university. Michael Schmidt, and he was a poet and a publisher, and he said, never have more than 20% of your income coming from one source. So have 5 things going at the same time, and if that one thing goes wrong,
Yeah, that's really good advice.
you've still got the other 4 things going.
And I probably have 5 things going myself.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, sometimes people see you at university, maybe they don't realise the other stuff that's going on as well.
So you mentioned earlier that PR companies would approach you to try and get some press.
Yeah.
But then after the Ministry thing and after turning down being a deputy editor of Ministry magazine, you set up your own PR company.
I did, and it was because I didn't know what PR was, and I now teach PR, which is bizarre, but it was Trafford Lovething, the DJ.
Yeah, Trafford.
Who said to me, "You write for all these magazines," and I was writing for a lot of different magazines. "How do I get in them?" And I said, "Well, I know the people. I'll make a phone call, see if I can get you in." And he went, "Well, if you do that, I'll give you a percentage of the door take of the club." So I was doing that, and it was a club called Holy City Zoo.
Yeah.
The Saturday night
I
was
played there many a
Devotion,
time, yeah.
where you know, the likes of Beckham and Ryan Giggs used to go, kind of swanky kind of Saturday night. They saw what I was doing, and they said, "What you're doing for Trafford, could you do that for us?" And I thought, well, okay, I'll make the same phone calls, call the same people that I know, who are friends of mine, and suddenly I was getting stories of people, and I didn't know what PR was, but before I knew what I was doing, I had 2 clients and a beginning of a business.
Yeah, but this was the pre-social media, really, wasn't it? Because I ended up being one of your clients.
You were one of my
and
clients.
you were getting me in every month. There was some magazine or some press thing, and then it started to get kind of online things as well.
That was
But you were really good at doing that.
And it grew to...
Because obviously your reputation as Simon Morrison / DJ Wrong,
yeah.
raver
Yeah.
/ journalist.
And now...
Bon vivant.
Raconteur.
Raconteur.
Now there's, agencies a go-go. Back then it was like no one was doing PR
No, yeah, I know.
for the rave scene in Manchester. And it all connected because I could talk to the people in London because I could make phone calls people couldn't make. Well, they could make them, but it would be a cold
No,
call.
exactly.
I could say to Chris at DJ, hey, Chris, it's me. Got this thing. I think you might be interested in writing a story about it. It's the same kind of thing as writing, but it's just the other side of it. But we were literally printing out press releases, sellotaping flyers to the top, and faxing them. Mm-hmm. And that's how we communicated with people, and on the phone, obviously.
And was it a good income? Because the reason I ask is when I was clearing out some paperwork a couple of years ago, I found your monthly invoices. And I thought, God, I can't believe I paid him that much. But it was pre-2008, pre-financial crash, when we were all earning more money. But when I thought about it, actually, no, that's pretty reasonable, I thought.
Well,
because
ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you can if you like, but because you did get me in the Manchester Evening News, the Guardian, Mix Mag, foreign magazines, and it's all about, if you're doing what I do, it's all about reminding people that you're there. Now, of course, I use social media, and people are always saying like, oh yeah, I saw you post, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So how much did you charge? Can you remember?
I don't know if you want to talk numbers, but I did buy the second flat with, with the proceeds of my... But then, I'd have maybe...
How many clients did you have?
8 to 10 clients on retainers.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, a few £100 a month each...
Exactly.
...is decent whack. And then, the company grew. Before I knew what I was doing, I thought I was making a few phone calls, helping friends out. I had an office, 3 people working, and one of whom was someone called Jenny Park.
Mrs. Park worked for Pad Communications until she got pregnant.
Yeah, and then never came back.
Yeah, she never came back.
Thanks for that.
Twins, Simon. It was tough.
But and that was really nice. We were very close at that point because your wife worked for the company and you were a client, but we were friends, and it was all and that was it was a really good time. PR is very different. It's very results driven. So I'm sure as a client you would have been saying, "Come on, what's been going on? There's no stories. Where are the stories?" Mm-hmm. But I still use your example in my lectures in PR because we got some really good.
No, we did, but presumably as a PR, if you're on a PR agency, you've got to really come up with ideas.
Yeah.
Because I know that through all the Hacienda Classical stuff and Hacienda Club Nights, our James Masters, James Masters, don't you? Our PR guy, he's like, no, we need a new angle. We can't. They don't want to do the same story. So,
yeah. It's all about angles, all about ideas. You might remember some of the things we did for you. We created a whole tour, if you remember that, the Graham Park Revolution.
That's right. I went around all the revolutions in the whole country and to promote a new vodka that doesn't exist anymore. It was a blue...
So I remember going to Swansea with you.
Swansea, Cardiff, and home in the same because Jenny was pregnant. Yeah. And we drove to Cardiff, and Swansea, and back.
Yeah. And I remember the strapline was celebrating 2 decades as a DJ with 2 decks of dance music.
That's it! Wow,
I like alliteration. And then you had a car, if you remember. Yeah. And we went racing in your car, and that became a story.
The Formula Ferrari Classic period.
Yes.
Your memory's much better than mine.
And then you had twins. Yeah. And I said to you, Graham, we were in the Evening News, and I said, how about, I've got an idea for a photo shoot. You put a baby on 2 decks, we spin them round, we take a photograph, and you said, no, we won't be doing that.
No, because they couldn't hold their heads up at that,
But we did get a story.
We did get a story.
DJ has twin babies, twin decks.
Twin decks, yeah.
I mean, I'd come up with anything.
But do you think this is a direct result of you partying around the world and getting paid for it? All your background and your experience and knowledge, you channeled into the PR company. Yeah,
and then because I saw it from the other way around, PR companies would approach me and they'd say, will you come to Ibiza with Judith Chalmers and wish you were here? Why? Because Nokia are paying, it's a gimmick.
Is she a bit of a raver, Judith?
She said she described herself as a game old bird.
Yeah?
That's what she said to me as we went to Manumission together.
How old was she then, though?
That must have been her 60s, I think.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, PR companies come with all kinds of stunts. It's gimmicks, isn't it? It's stunts.
It is gimmicks. So, when did pad communications kind of come to an end?
Well, I mean, in a way, I've still got a website and I've still got a couple of clients. I do press for a music festival I'm involved with called Louder Than Words.
Yeah, no, the Louder Words, I forgot to mention that. That's a great festival. It's in Manchester every year where you get, it's like this, but with like really well-known famous people. You know what I mean? I mean, you've asked me on a couple of times.
Yeah, so we do panel discussions, we have Q&As, we've got, all sorts of people from music and from bands and the punk bands, and because John Robb's the main organiser.
That's right.
So,
John Robb, who's been here before as well.
Yeah. So, I still do the PR for that, and we do really well with the PR for that. So I'm still doing it, but just not as much because, and it's almost, as I hit 40, I could see things changing. I could see that the writing was slowing down, the PR was slowing down, things had changed, the industry had changed, social media, the digital sphere, and I wasn't up on that. And writing, if you're going to write about nightclubs, being 40 years old doesn't really swing it. Nobody wants to be the oldest swinger in town. Even Peter Stringfellow's gone now, hasn't he?
Yeah, you've not been to Clockwork Orange night though recently, have you? That's 40's young there.
Right.
Bizarrely.
No,
Maybe there's an angle for you there.
Yeah.
In fact, if you want to come to Clockstock, we'll talk about that later.
Right. But I could see that I needed an exit strategy. That I just think I could see that I was arriving at airports and people were holding up a sign for Simon Morrison, and they'd go, "Oh, that's me." Like, oh, who's brought their dad?
Yeah.
I'm like, right, okay, all right.
So do you think it's important then to be aware of what's happening and to kind of because you want to keep doing what you enjoy doing, but you have to reinvent what you do.
You have to reinvent yourself. And and I saw that I needed to do that quite early on. Got married, had 4 kids, and chickens. So
chickens.
And you've been to the
Fresh
house.
eggs though.
Fresh eggs. And all of a sudden, I had a garden in a suburb, and I was like growing vegetables, thinking, hang on a minute, I was in Ibiza 10 minutes ago, and now I've become this kind of suburban character, and I've got out of that again now, but that's another story. But
but it's not loose women.
But I thought I need to change the scene, and obviously there's the pressure to bring money in for the family.
Yeah, of course.
And the thing that I thought I could fall back on was my brain, which was still working, despite what they say about raving. And I thought I'd go back to university. So I can explain to these. I've been paying fees up until last year.
Really?
I did a PhD.
You did a PhD. That's about your PhD.
For 7 years, I did a PhD. It's as old as one of my children, on nightclubs. So after being DJ Wrong, I've now become Dr. Disco, they call me, because it was a PhD. And the wonderful thing about research and studying is you can really indulge your passions. So I did it at Leeds, University of Leeds, and I said to them, I want to go back and think about the club scene, but from a different angle, as an older guy looking, not back, but looking on that scene, on the dance floor from a more academic perspective. So I wrote a PhD, which is going to be published by Bloomsbury, I hope, as a book. And it was about...
I'd like to read a copy of that.
Yeah, you're in it. Not necessarily the club scene, but books about the club scene.
Right, okay.
So it's called Disco Texts.
Disco Texts?
Do you like that?
Very good.
So I interviewed Irving Welsh, who wrote Trainspotting, but wrote a lot about the club scene. Manchester writers like Jeff Noon, who wrote Vert and Pollen, Nicholas Blinko, who wrote a book called Acid Casuals and Manchester Slingback. And you contributed, you might remember, because I was also looking at films about the club scene, and also, magazines about, films like 24-Hour Party People that we were commented on.
Quickly, 24-Hour Party People, I remember when they rebuilt the inside of the Hacienda, because they knocked the Hacienda down literally months before they started filming 24-Hour People. Now, you were a Hacienda regular.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was there every weekend for 9 years. They rebuilt the interior.
Yeah.
How accurate was it?
It was frightening.
Exactly.
It was frightening, because you'd say to people, where do you put your coat? Well, the
you know where
it
you
always
coat,
was. And the toilets were in the same place. And the first alcove where the gang Salford used to sit was full of moody people. I couldn't work out if that was actors or they were just really...
It was incredible, wasn't it?
And then the bar was in the same place, and it was serving.
Yeah.
So in terms of authenticity,
there
was me and you at the bar.
Exactly.
There was one moment, when we turned around, and I think we almost both said, this is too much. Because everyone's wearing that kind of gear.
Yeah, you had to get in on the film, to get on the set, you had to dress late 80s, didn't you?
So I was trying to squeeze into my my Stone Roses T-shirts from 1989 once I'd figured out what they were.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be able to relive your youth like that.
No,
It was
but
too
we
much.
did. It was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was a great experience to be there with
But
you.
I always tell people that film or TV versions of clubs are always absolutely rubbish. But you've seen 24 Hour Party, people. It is like the Hacienda, isn't it? Totally.
Yeah,
It's the only example of real, genuine clubbing I've ever seen.
Yeah, and the other one that people seem to say that they quite like is Human Traffic.
Yeah, Human Traffic.
And the other one that always comes up is Kevin and Perry Go Large.
Yes.
But I think, if you're going to satirise something, like Kevin and Perry satirised Ibiza and the rave scene, everyone's got to be in on the joke. So it became that big, Ibiza, DJing, the whole thing, that it could function as a satire for a big commercial film like that. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, I went to Ibiza for the first time in 12 years last summer, paid for to do some research. And I did. And I was researching films about Ibiza. And I'm presenting that research in Canberra, in Australia, in June at an academic conference. And I don't know if anyone's seen here, there was a film called Ibiza that came out on Netflix last year, and they called it Ibiza. It was about the kind of Ibiza scene, Ibiza clubs, and it was filmed in Croatia. And the director had never been to Ibiza.
Oh, really?
So it's caused this big stink. And the Spanish government are actually considering suing Netflix for misrepresentation.
Yeah, only because Netflix have got the money to be sued for. And so finally, you're now senior lecturer at Chester University, programme leader for, what is it?
Music journalism.
Music journalism. So that's where you are now. Is that something you wanted to do, or just how did you become a lecturer?
Yeah, I mean, I started my PhD just with a view to wanting to get my brain working again. And it did. And I got, while I was doing that, I got the job at Chester, teaching music journalism. And it's all kind of fallen into place quite beautifully. And the other thing that's happened is a story I wrote for The Guardian. This is a whole other story. But I wrote a story for The Guardian about an ambulance that was driven to Libya during the Arab Spring, an NHS ambulance that this guy bought from eBay. And he drove it to Libya. And I wrote it for The Guardian. It went down really, really well. And I turned that into a screenplay. The first screenplay I've ever written.
Wow.
I bought a book from Amazon called How to Write a Screenplay, and I read it and I wrote one, and I've sold it to the BBC.
Excellent.
So I've got friends of mine who said that you don't sell the first thing you've ever written to the BBC.
Unless he's Simon Morrison.
Well, so that's getting made as well.
OK, so let's go back to the 10-year-old Simon with his pen behind his ear and his... Was that an Olivetti typewriter?
I think,
yeah.
Probably Olympus.
Did you ever have one of those green
for Las
visors,
Vegas.
yeah?
Like Hunter S. Thompson, yeah.
OK, you can go back to the 10-year-old Simon and tell him that you're going to do all the things you just talked about. What would he say?
He'd be amazed and overawed and concerned and worried that I'd come out the other end.
Yeah.
But I think, I have, and I love the fact that I can go to New York and Chicago and Detroit and Ibiza like I used to, but now thinking academically rather than journalistically.
Just quickly, you said you got deported from where? Russia?
Russia, yeah.
How did that? Just quickly tell us how about
I
that.
couldn't possibly, it's a miss.
OK, fair enough.
It was a miss.